Hello and welcome everyone back to the Tiberium Armory series. I'm your host, Game Master Karakin, and this week we have on our docket the Stealth Tank Generations 1 through 3, Ezekiel's Wheel, and generally Stealth Tech in CNC, Part 1. Created in secret before the outbreak of the First Tiberium War, the Stealth Tank, codenamed Ezekiel's Wheel, is probably the second most iconic vehicle of the Tiberium franchise. There are three main generations of the Stealth Tank, lining up with each of the Tiberium Wars, but they all share the same base components: missile launchers, a cloaking field, and the terrifying battlefield reputation and mystique that befits the name King bestowed onto the vehicle. The first generation Stealth Tank comes in at an estimated 21 feet long, 16 feet wide, and 14 feet tall. Compared to a contemporary vehicle, the medium tank, or Abrams tank, which is 26 feet long, 12 foot wide, and 8 feet tall, the Stealth Tank is overall larger. It is driven on four roughly 6 foot wide treads on a wide chassis powered by a powerful engine of unknown maker model, though given the sophistication of Nod's technology and the design of the wheel arms, I would speculate that the tank Generation 1 had the same sort of generator-driven electric motors that the Predator, Mammoth, and some real-life vehicles such as the Helmet has. These systems eliminate many parts crucial to a conventional vehicle and limit the damage of mines, something that a stealth tank would find useful as it stalks through enemy lines. It would likely decrease the noise that a vehicle would make, which would also be useful, but I digress. Generation 1 can move around at about 30 to 40 miles an hour at hardened terrain and 15 off-road. Generation 1 is armed with two Dragon tow missile launchers located at the top of the vehicle. It has the capacity to fire on, track, and homing on targets ranging from aircraft, tanks, although it has trouble with infantry. The Dragon tow missile system is an unknown variant, but if it functions like other tow missiles, its capabilities range from AA to AT and even anti-bunker at ranges of up to 2.8 miles or 4.5 kilometers. These missiles are able to rapidly reload, allowing for a surprisingly high rate of fire, although it is not known how many missiles the vehicle itself carries. The Generation 1 has relatively light armor, but for the light armor it trades for the device known as the Lazarus Shield. The device functions by warping light in a bubble around the vehicle, rendering it and everything else within the field invisible to the naked eye. The intense power requirements of this technology necessitated that the shield be dropped before and during firing, as the power to remain invisible while launching missiles was considered unattainably expensive. One interesting thing you can see while you look at the Generation 1 is the wire bundles along the side and on the treads. These portray that while undeniably effective, the tanks were yet a work in progress, as the tanks from the next two generations did not have this feature, instead integrated everything into the hull. Next thing to look at is not Generation 2, but the Black Hand version, possibly deployed in the latter half of the First Tiberium War, if the look of the vehicle is any indication. A notable difference to Generation 1 is that the distortion generator is inside the paneling of the vehicle. This model also appears to be somewhat smaller than Generation 1, although it cannot be certain that it is, as everything else in Renegade is distorted inside somewhat. My guess is that it is 18 feet wide, 16 feet long, and 12 feet tall, given a cockpit size of 4 feet by 3 feet tall. The vehicle also features a swiveling base that functions as a turret, allowing the variant to fire at targets behind them without having to change positions. The vehicle also seemed to be using a different version of the Lazarus Shield, perhaps an experimental approved version, as some of the tanks suffered from flickering and distortion that would reveal their locations to enemies that were near enough. The Generation 2 stealth tank was created somewhere in the interim period between the First and Second Tiberium War, as Nod, seemingly unperturbed by the apparent death of Cain, improved the technology immensely, although the flaw that necessitated the cloak deactivation during firing was still present. The new version of the tank had an increased engine and power and heavier armor, but it was somewhat larger, measuring out at 20 feet wide, 20 feet long, and 10 feet tall. The Generation 2 can travel at 60 miles an hour on hardened terrain and 30 off-road. The newer stealth system has fewer errors in its processing, making deaths by close-range spotting a much rarer occurrence. The Generation 2 carried 2 pairs of Dragon tow missile launchers, doubling its firepower and allowing for even more rapid liquidation of enemies from a safe vantage point a couple of kilometers away. From the concept art here, we can see 2 other versions that failed to come across the drawing board. The first failed prototype, very reminiscent of the final version, had exhaust pipes coming out the back, suggesting that the initial versions were powered by inexpensive conventional combustion engines rather than the more advanced technology available at the time. The second concept used the Blackhand model swiveling cockpit and appeared to be smaller and with a thinner wheelbase. These design choices are interesting as they project a conflict in the design attitude that might reflect the absence of Cain in the days of its development. Generation 3 was developed sometime after Cain's recovery after the Firestorm crisis and represented a ground-up redesign and repurposing, in large part for the purposes of branding, as I discussed in the Scorpion tank video. The new version had 3 treads and was completely silent, capable of masking all noise from its movement but for the sound of the environment underneath it. It was powered by a Tiberium-based fuel system with 0 emissions to control its EM ER tracking potential. It was armed by 2 6-barrel rocket launchers, enabling it to fire up to 12 guided rockets at a target on the ground or in the air in a few seconds. The cloaking system had also been vastly improved, allowing it to be detected only by the use of an advanced base defense sensors, and only at close ranges. This combination made it deadly enough to deal lethal damage to everything but epic units in short order, and in packs, nothing was safe, as the Generation 3 hit, cloaked, and backed out before anything could get a clear hit on it. Before moving on, it is important to talk about a usage of terms here. Rockets versus missiles. Here is a basic definition of a rocket and a missile. A rocket can be defined as a missile or spacecraft which acquires high speeds from a rocket engine. A missile can be defined as a self-driven munition system that is powered by a rocket. Rockets do need guidance. All missiles, such as ballistic or anti-tank missiles, are guided. Every rocket is a missile. Every missile may not be a rocket. For the purposes of this discussion, think of the difference as rockets are generally artillery and missiles are generally pinpoint ordnance. The implication of the switch to rockets is interesting, although it could just be an artifact of the closeness of the language being used here. When I read that Generation 3 has 2 racks of rockets and can engage aircraft effectively, I read that as missiles, not rockets. Alright, getting back into it, the Generation 3 has a completely enclosed crew compartment for its pilot, which makes estimating its size difficult. I estimate that it's 16 feet wide, 26 feet long, and 12 feet tall, making it much more in line with a medium tank in size. At a maximum speed of around 90 miles an hour on hardened terrain, and 50 off-road, making it the fastest version of the stealth tank. Lastly, this version of the Ezekiel's wheel tank comes with a powerful upgrade in the form of the Tiberium core missile, which replaces the regular explosive warhead of the missile with a dense Tiberium core, greatly increasing its penetrating power. It shares this upgrade with the attack bike, the Mantis, and the SAM turret. Before moving on to the next part, I will take a moment to address the core weakness of the stealth tank. Number 1, in the first 2 versions, as with the Scorpion and many other of the Brotherhood vehicles, the cockpit is on the exterior of the vehicle and is armored only with a bullet-resistant glass. Number 2, the armor of the craft is too thin to take more than a hit or two before being knocked out. And 3, the third generation makes up for some of these weaknesses with speed, that because of the shift in doctrine between the second and third Tiberium War, which I allude to in my Scorpion tank video, away from winning and towards branding, the Generation 3 gives up a lot of its practical design features for a more refined shape. It is a good case model for the fact that Cain's goal during the Third War, unlike with the Second, wasn't to win the war, but to draw the Skrin to Earth, all for his plans of ascension. Part 2 of the video is about the name of the vehicle. The stealth tank was named Ezekiel's Wheel by Cain, and although no one but the prophet knows exactly why, we can make some speculation. Command & Conquer is a series that from its very inception was steeped in biblical storytelling and lore. Cain himself modeled his origin story off of the biblical story of Cain and Abel, and named his organization after the land of Nod from the Bible. There might be some truth to the story, as there's evidence that supports Cain's existence all the way back from 1200 BC, but likely not in the biblical sense, as Cain's proposed timeline necessitates a young Earth, which doesn't gel with the rest of the realistic, futuristic elements of the Tiberium series, such as Tiberium the Skrin, or the evidential reality of space-time within the series. Beyond that, however, if we were to consider the implications of his using the term Ezekiel's Wheel, we might start to see some interesting points come up. First off, what is Ezekiel's Wheel a reference to? I actually had to do some research on this, as I'm not the most well-versed in biblical mythology. It is in fact a reference to the old biblical entity known as an Ophanim. Pardon my pronunciation. An Ophanim is a type of angel described in the book of Ezekiel in a vision, a creature of a wheel within a wheel, with eyes along the edges of the wheels. These wheels were meant to carry the chariot and throne of God across the heavens, and they are bizarre things, likely a Judeo-Christian artifact of the religion's roots in Aramaic faiths from the Middle East, such as the Asherism, Sumerian belief, and Akkadian belief, which includes creatures such as the Lamassu, with the body of a lion, wings of an eagle, and the head of a king. Looking closely at the role of the stealth tank within Nod, we can see that at the birth of Nod's role in the world, the stealth tank was the most advanced weapon in the arsenal of Nod. It is possible the stealth tank was named thus to represent the technology and force that would principally lead Nod to victory towards Cain's goal of ascension. Or, as discussed in the first Skrin theory crafting video, it's possible that the reference might be to the mysterious others that the Skrin refer to, and their use of cloaking technology. That race would be as gods to humanity, so it would stand to reason that Cain, using his otherworldly knowledge, would pay homage to that race of entities that even the Skrin acknowledges as superior. I asked some other people in my community about what this significance could mean, and the priestess from the Order of Pierce says this about the wheels. She's someone who knows a fair amount more about the mythology that I was trying to dive into. And I quote, Ezekiel describes the wheels in this way. Wherever the spirit would go, they would go, and the wheels would rise among them, because the spirit of the living creatures was in the wheels. Ezekiel 1:20-21. They are the spiritual half to the physical manifestation of God. Think of the Holy Ghost Spirit in the Trinity. The spiritual half represents the omnipotence and omnipresence of God. I'm guessing that the name works on two fronts. It's a car, it has wheels, so it fits into the physical trait. Ezekiel's wheel is sometimes drawn as part of a chariot. And also, considering it's a stealth tank, it's meant for intelligence gathering, omnipotence, and ambush, omnipresence. Unquote. Stefan, another lore expert from the channel No Strings Productions, which you should totally subscribe to, made another observation. Could this just be a prototype name with no deeper meaning? Having a biblical name for the project gives it more gravitas than, for instance, a graham cracker, unquote. Indeed, that could be. Every country has its arbitrary naming schemes, with names given to things without a lot of deep meaning being given, such as the B-2 strategic bomber called the Spirit, or the Gerald R. Ford aircraft carrier. Both of these adopt these names without an elaborate amount of thought going into the symbolism. Any theory here could be true. We'll likely never know the truth, but these are just my favored speculations. And part 3 of the video is a short blurb discussing stealth technology in general and in the Command & Conquer universe. In real life, stealth technology is in its primitive stages, decades away from use in military applications. There is a powerful stealth technology in active use today, called low observable technology on the B-2 Spirit bomber. Temperature-sensitive paneling on some tanks to allow it to regulate its temperature through full IR optics. But all of these pale before what Nod has accomplished. What Nod does is something much closer to what a chameleon or a cuttlefish does, crypsis. Crypsis is defined as the ability of an organism to conceal itself, especially from a predator, by having color, pattern, or shape that allows it to blend into the surrounding environment, and Nod accomplishes all these points, allowing their vehicles to be invisible to all the senses. They achieve this by bending light away from the vehicle or operator, forcing the person to view the tank to see what's behind it, using a field generated from unknown technology. The closest that people in real life, outside the military presumably, as we never know what might be classified and being developed right now, come to this is the retroreflective projection, a process which uses retroreflective material and a projector to render a person or an object partially invisible. While stealth fields like the ones in Star Trek and Command & Conquer are science fiction for now, the British Army has reported that testing of an invisible tank and a plasma-based cloaking device was patented in 1991, so don't be fooled by the outrageous nature of the concept. As with all things within Command & Conquer, there are real-life examples and theoretical models making C&C one of the most consistently realistic universes out there. At the end here, I'd like to thank everyone for watching and to tell you to watch out for a honorable mentions video that I'll make sometime soon about the 2 vehicles that didn't make the cut for today's discussion of stealth vehicles. And I'd like to make a special thanks to Stefan from No Strings Prd and his friend, the Priestess of the Order Pierce, for their advanced insight into the intentions of Cain. Alright everyone, I hope you have a wonderful day. The Game Master Karrakin signing off.